and welcome to the Lane Transit District Board of Directors meeting. It's June 16th, 2021. Thanks for being here, and let's start with roll call. So I'm going to start with Joshua Scove.
Here.
Thanks, Josh. Don Norden. Don't see Don. We will make a note. Oh, go ahead.
He will be joining shortly. I've just spoke to him.
Oh, great. Perfect. Thanks for doing that, AJ. We'll make a note when he joins. I know Emily Secord is not present, so Michelle Weber.
Here.
Okay, thanks so much, Michelle. And then I don't see Susan, so no Susan right now. Stephen Yet.
Present.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. So, did you hear anything from Susan by any chance, AJ or anyone?
I did not.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for being here. Those who can, I know this is a tough time of day, and as the summer nights get a little longer and there's sunshine and warm outside, it gets a little harder to sit in these meetings. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you to all the participants also taking the time out of their day to be here, and LTD staff. So let's just get rolling. I just want to put it out there. We have a really full agenda tonight. We have a lot of topics we need to cover. With that being said, I ask you to be efficient and concise in your comments and your questions. And if we get to a point where we have to kind of do a speed round or a final wrap up, we will do that in order to stay on time. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to comments from the general manager. AJ, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And a few things here. I do have a comment. Let me look this up. I'm happy to report that many of you know that we started the launch of the electronic fare program before the pandemic began. And due to the pandemic, we suspended that since we were fareless throughout the pandemic. But with the resumption of fares, we've been able to coordinate the launch of the electronic fare program with Lane Community College and the U of O. I've got some preliminary numbers for LCC, but let me first give some thanks to our past board president, Carl Ye, who has been instrumental and the person overseeing the implementation. So as you know, this is a program Carl has been very passionate about. So having him on the LCC side has been really great. So to give you some numbers on that, the spring term was made available to 4,207 students who are eligible for the pass. Of those, LCC used benefits codes to students, and 286 people redeemed the benefits code. And 175 unique students use the pass to board a bus. So 175 out of 286, that's a really good number. And of those individuals, we've had 3,942 boardings actually using the pass. So we hope that this provides them a view of the services LTD provides and that they will continue using it. The U of O is likewise implementing it as part of their group pass program with students, faculty, and staff. And we are close to implementation with them. So we don't have numbers for them yet, but we're happy to see that we are proceeding in the upcoming year with the group pass program electronic. So very exciting. And as many of you know on the board, is this really provides us an insight into ridership data. Aggregate, so no individual data, but we'll be able to present more information on ridership in the future. So I'll come back for that.
Thanks so much, AJ. I'm going to move on to announcements and additions to agenda. And as I mentioned, we have a very full agenda. So please only add something that would require urgent action today. Anyone? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Let's go ahead and move on to Employee of the Month for June. I'm going to turn that back over to AJ.
Yes, As the board may recall, we suspended actually making the formal presentation at the board meeting. We are doing that at the staff level, but we still want to bring forward the recognition to the June Employee of the Month, which is Carrie Baker. Carrie Baker works in our public safety and operations portion of our organization, and she is being recognized. Number one, she's amazing. She should be recognized every month. But what she is particularly being recognized is as part of the work in doing the operator bid. And as we know, we're living in a virtual environment. She took the initiative to develop a website and an app using already foundational software that she can then utilize. And she uploaded information about the operator assignments so that operators were able to remotely access information about how to bid on assignments. And for those of you that have ever worked in a bid type environment, the number one person in seniority, of course, gets all the choices. And the second person gets the least amount of choices. And as you move on there, it gets really messy, complicated, stressful for employees. And we have not had a software or electronic solution. It has been in person, and with COVID, that posed a big challenge throughout the pandemic. But with Carrie developing this, it really changed the way operators conduct business. I will tell you, as a person that was at the station the day it was launched, I mean, everybody was in great spirits. Operators were cheering on the great work. So I really just want to congratulate her, share that story with the board, and let them know that this is a monumental change in the way our frontline employees select their assignments moving forward. So big accomplishment from one person who took it upon herself to do it better. So kudos to her.
Thanks so much. And that's awesome. Huge round of applause. That's great. We really appreciate you sharing those stories. I just wanted to note that Josh mentioned earlier he's having some technical difficulties. And Josh, if your camera turns off, that's fine. Everyone should feel comfortable in this meeting, whether you're an introvert and your camera stays off or you want to keep it on, whatever your comfort level is, we're happy to accommodate that. So no worries. We understand things happen. Let's move on to audience participation, and I will let Camille handle this part. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Caitlin. I will go ahead and read the instructions to give anyone a chance to raise their hand if they're wanting to provide testimonies. I don't have any hands raised at the moment. To indicate that you would like to provide testimony, please use the raise your hand feature. For those attending via phone only, press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. When it is your time to speak, your name will be called. For those attending via phone only, the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called. Please state your name, city of residence, and who you are representing for the audio record. Once you have provided testimony, your hand will be lowered. Please do not raise your hand again. Only one opportunity to speak is provided. For those unable or not wanting to speak publicly, testimony may be provided via email at clerk@ltd.org. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per community member. A timer will be displayed on the screen and will beep when the 3 minutes is up. And I still do not show anyone wishing to provide testimony this evening. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Camille. And I just want to recognize both Susan and Dawn have joined the meeting. Thank you for being here this evening. Let's go ahead and move on to our next section. So we're breezing right along. Thank you so much, everybody. So let's go ahead and move on to board member reports. Is there anyone in this group that wishes to share on their committee meetings?
Caitlin, I can share the contract committee had only one item to discuss this week. We had a very quick conversation, and that is on the consent agenda.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. Let's see. Anything for Lane Act, Dawn?
Lena continues to work on its pilot, mostly we just got a report from ODOT. So there's really nothing new there.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. Appreciate that. Josh, do you want to comment on the MPC meeting?
Oh, well, and that since it was joint, half of it was joint with Lane Act, and we heard from a couple of members of the Oregon Transportation Committee, Commission, the OTC, the oversight body for ODOT, for those folks who may not know. I guess I would just say from that meeting, I think this is important to say to the whole board. I think we should think of ourselves as having to really work to have a voice locally, we and our local jurisdictions. When I heard the questions from city councilors from Eugene and Springfield, it's pretty clear that local jurisdictions don't always feel clearly heard at the state level. So just for us to keep in mind that a way for us to support our other jurisdictions locally, just to sort of think about how we can work together to have a stronger voice with ODOT. But that was what I took away. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I'd just leave it at that.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I do want to say thank you all to this board for being part of that joint work session with the Eugene City Council, and specifically for letting the Eugene City Council ask questions and voice whatever they were feeling about moving ahead. I feel like that I just really appreciate letting them process and verbalize, because we really wanted to hear from Eugene City Council. So that went really well. So thank you for that participation. And the last thing I'll mention is that for the Strategic Planning Committee, we got a presentation, an additional presentation by Lindsay with TransPro. And where we're at is that we're going to have our next Strategic Planning Committee meeting in July, where essentially they're going to give that final presentation where we make a formal recommendation to the board. And ideally we had a work session July 7th for the board where we could get that first glance at that strategic business plan before we actually vote and adopt on it, so we can ask questions and feel comfortable with it. The tricky part is both Emily and I are out of town for the next Strategic Planning Committee, so we are looking to reschedule that so that we can still be in that meeting and be the bridge between the Strategic Planning Committee and this board, and give you guys feedback on what those Strategic Planning Committee members are feeling, what kind of questions they're asking, so that you really have the full picture of how these important stakeholders are relating to the strategic business plan. So you might see some things pop up from Camille, but we are looking to reschedule both the Strategic Planning Committee meeting and our work session. But it feels pretty good to be close to the end, right? That we're getting pretty close. So that's pretty exciting. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for mentioning their committee work. So let's go ahead and move forward if there's nothing else. And we will jump right in to consent calendar. So anyone want to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So moved by Dawn and second by Stephen. Let's do a roll call vote. And I'm just going to go through real quick. Josh Wascove.
Aye.
Thank you, Josh. And Susan Cox.
Aye.
Thank you, Susan. Don Norden.
Aye.
Thanks, Don. Stephen Yett.
Aye.
Thank you, Stephen. Michelle Weber.
Aye.
Perfect. And then I, Caitlin, also vote aye. So that passes unanimously. All right. Thank you so much. We now have our first presenter up. It's Tiffany Edwards. She's going to be talking about the Franklin Boulevard Raise grant application. We're looking good on time. We have 10 minutes allotted for this. So please keep that in mind. Okay. Welcome, Tiffany. We're so excited to see you. And I like your candy corn shirt. Makes me get excited for fall and Halloween.
So, yeah, was thinking more like summer, but I guess I'm off on my seasons. Anyway, good evening tonight. Tiffany Edwards here. I'm your Intergovernmental Relations Manager for LTD, and I'm going to be bringing you 2 items. The first of those being the Franklin Raise grant application. Joining me, and Camille, you'll have to look for them. Larissa Varela with the City of Eugene and Monica Sather with the Springfield. They're here for just if there are any questions that come up, and so she can potentially bring them over if needed. So you have all been provided with the materials from a grant from 2020 for this same project. It's all in your packet for reference. The 2021 materials are being updated as we speak and will be submitted by July 12th. And so everything is mostly the same, but there's a couple of exceptions. So I'm just going to go through those. And then, of course, since we do have a couple of new board members, I'll briefly share what the Franklin Corridor project entails. And share my screen really quickly. Hopefully you here. Can I get a thumbs up? You guys see my map? Okay. So this project is a redesign of Franklin Boulevard from Alder Street to I-5 in Eugene. So this is that section. And then from I-5 Glenwood to basically the McVeigh section, if you're familiar with that, in Springfield. So this is a former state highway that's now under the jurisdiction of the cities of Eugene and Springfield, and they're both working in collaboration on this project along with LTD. LTD is a partner, and we're providing funding for the project as part of the local match. And one of the components of this project, and I'm gonna jump, I'm in for your reference, I'm gonna jump to page 52 of it real quick. Just right left corner here. Part of this project is one of the components is an additional bi-directional dedicated MX lane. And so that would allow us to deliver 7-minute service on our busiest MX routes. So we will see with the cities and contributing to those efforts. And there is a lot of detailed information in your project. Back in April of 2020, this project was presented and approved by the board under what was called the BUILD grant. And the grant is for $25 million. It's the same this year. It's for phase 2 of this project. None of that has changed from last year to this year. The cities of Eugene and Springfield applied for a BUILD grant that better utilizing investments to leverage development. And the criteria for this grant in the former administration was heavily focused on the opportunity zones and development opportunities in these areas of the corridor. Despite having received the highest possible in all categories, we were not successful in securing this grant. However, with the new administration's and the grant program's criteria better aligning with this project, we feel very optimistic that this is our year. So this same competitive grant through the current administration is called the RAISE grant. That acronym is Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. And this shift in emphasis aligns really well with the values of the Biden administration, as well as for this project, and it's really well suited. So as we work of those materials, we are just shifting the focus a bit from economic development and then emphasizing how this project really supports sustainability and equity and embodies those community values and those values of LTD. So you have a resolution before you on page 69 of your packet, which support for LTD's participation project and in this grant application process. And I guess with that, it's pretty short and sweet. I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, we're just really looking for your continued support for this project in the grant and its new iteration. Caitlin, if you want to call on anyone who happens to have questions, and happy to see if I can answer anything.
I don't see any hands raised right now. Oh, there we go. Josh. And then if you're not referencing what's on the screen, go ahead and put it back in gallery view, or like take it off shared screen. Okay, awesome. All right, Josh, thanks so much. Go ahead.
Oh, and I'm happy to get in line. I'm happy to wait for other people if people have questions.
I don't see any other hands right now, so go for
it. Okay. Just kind of put a little bit of pressure on the fellow board members there for a second. I apologize if I couldn't quite get this out of the AIS. And I'm almost certain it wasn't in the slides, but my understanding was that the barrier to going to 7.5-minute service from 10-minute service was the bottleneck on Franklin by the university, not in Glenwood, just because there are some single track areas there, and that in Glenwood we're, you know, on city streets, so there's nothing there that would prevent us from doing more frequent service. Am I not remembering that right?
Would definitely be a question for actually probably someone at LTD, not me, because I'm actually not super familiar with that. It might be.
I see Larissa appearing. Okay.
You're seeing what?
I said I saw Larissa appear. I don't know if you were going to answer that, Larissa.
Is Larissa over? If she happens to know that, I'm going to let her answer. And if not, we might see if Tom will. If you worked on this grant from last year. Larissa, there you are.
Yeah, I can answer it. So you're right, Josh. The bottleneck is on Franklin on the Eugene side of the corridor. It's not in Glenwood. So there's sections of the Eugene side where there's only the one-way ability for the buses to move. So they're having to take turns and wait on each other if they're going opposite directions at this point in time. And so for this first phase and what we're proposing in the grant, we'll be building out the two-way MX throughout the entire corridors in Eugene from, I-5, really it starts at Walnut where the MX gets into 2 lanes all the way to Alder. And so we'll solve that bottleneck problem if we're awarded this grant.
Okay, I think that answers it for now. I guess it's sort of kicked off into the future a little bit, but yeah. Sorry, I was just looking at it was the slide that Tiffany had showed that I think dragged my brain to the Glenwood piece. The only reason I ask is that in talking to members of the community, sometimes people say, I feel like we just built that. Why are we rebuilding it? And I think that's an understandable question, but being able to talk about having designated right of way and the importance of that is a fairly easy response. So that's helpful. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Josh.
Hey, Stephen, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's not so much a question, but just a comment, and maybe piggyback on Josh's question/comment a moment ago. I think one of the advantages of this expansion and enhancement of this section of our service is it's safer both for pedestrians, bus riders, and also for the ATU bus drivers. So that's long-term, and that's not necessarily directly correlated with how busy it is. It's just, it'll make the whole section safer for all those folks. So I think that's something we should not lose sight of. That's all. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Dawn, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Dawn.
Early on in this discussion, there was a lot of concern about the trees on that section. Has that been resolved? Are we, everybody happy about the 50-year-old trees that were at one point, how this was without doing that? Does anybody know that right now?
So John, I'll just say, appreciate your question. I'm not super familiar with the trees, and if Larissa wants to jump in, I will say that the point in the project that we're at right now, it probably leaves a lot of design and a lot of really a lot of the work is yet to come. So I think some of that work you may be referencing is kind of stuff that we would be doing once we can really start to do all the work. But I will see if Larissa happens to know anything about the tree issue that I am not familiar with, and I apologize.
Donald, so first of all, I'm Larissa Burley. I'm a transportation planner for the city of Eugene, for those of you who don't know me already. But Donald, which trees are you talking about?
The ones on Franklin Avenue. In the, I think the center Boulevard.
Yeah, so yeah, now you're asking. So currently in the city of Eugene charter, there is some protection for trees. And that was an issue when LTD built the MX the first time in the early 2000s. And so we had our attorney interpret the charter and give us her legal opinion. And because we'll be expanding the roadway for the bus and for people walking and biking, we've kind of gone over that issue because we won't be expanding it for additional travel lanes for personal automobiles.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Josh, did you want to ask your question or comment?
Yeah, super quick comment. I know it's supposed to be a short agenda item, Caitlin, sorry, but super quick comment, and then I'm happy to make a motion to adopt if no one else has other comments. I guess, there are lots of times where we have transportation investments that come before us and we're like, what's the bigger picture here? I feel like the thing that's exciting about this is like the bigger picture has already long since started arriving. The amount of investment in this corridor by the U of O and other entities is just astonishing. And so this is really a chance to, bring in the transportation infrastructure that fully fleshes this out. It's an incredibly exciting part of, it doesn't feel like a town down there. It feels like a city, and that's deliberate. So I just want to say I'm really supportive of this and appreciate the work with our partners.
Well said. All right, final call. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for presenting that. And Larissa, we really appreciate the time for you to be here this evening. And also Monica, but as Josh said, we applaud the partnership and just thank you to everyone for your hard work. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing.
May I make a motion?
Yes.
All right. Then I move to adopt resolution number 2021-06-16-033, LTD supported Franklin Boulevard corridor project and raise grant application.
I'll second.
Perfect. We had Josh make the motion and Don provide the second. So let's go ahead and vote. Michelle Weber.
Aye.
Thanks, Michelle. Susan Cox.
Aye.
Thanks, Susan. Don Norden.
Aye.
Thanks, Don. Stephen Yett.
Aye.
Thanks, Stephen. And Joshua Scove.
Aye.
Thanks, Josh. And I also vote aye. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thanks for being time conscious. We really appreciate that this evening. All right. And good questions, you guys, and good comments on that. So Tiffany's going to stay on as we move on to our next agenda item. So Tiffany's going to be talking about the temporary use of vacant property with the city of Eugene. And I believe, Tiffany, that a lot of the information was the handouts that are not in the regular packet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
You should have 3 handouts, and I can pull them up if you'd like me to share a screen when I'm
I think the board members have them. I just wanted to call everyone's attention to the fact that you'll need to actually pull up those handouts instead of refer to your agenda packet. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks, Tiffany, and hit it.
All right, thank you. I also just want to make a quick mention that there was an update. I think there was a typo, so we've updated the packet as well. So that, just make sure you have the right, I believe it was on the resolution. So if you, page 75 in your packet for reference. So you are correct. You are stuck with me for this next item. And it's the temporary use of vacant property by the city of Eugene. I do believe that Brooke Freed, who is working on this for the city of Eugene, is also joining us. So if you have questions, we'll pull her over. And, you know, she actually is doing a lot of work around the city's efforts to transition folks from widespread unsanctioned camping throughout our community into managed sleep sites and supportive services for the communities and housed populations. So for a couple of years now, the city of Eugene has been actively searching for properties that could be utilized to provide shelter and coordinated services for unhoused members of our community. Due to COVID, an increased number of homeless individuals and families in the community, shelter space really has not been sufficient, and people simply have no place to go. As you may recall hearing from Kristen Denmark previously, when she gave an explanation on this Ninth Circuit Court ruling, it's made it really challenging for the city to manage without alternative places to have people go. So as I think a lot of you have seen, there are a lot of people camping or parked basically wherever they can, in tents, in cars, in the rights of way, in all of these areas that are unsanctioned. They're without services like bathrooms or hand washing facilities, trash receptacles. So it's unsafe, it's unsanitary, and it's really in need of some serious solutions. So recently, Eugene City Council took action to allow for additional individuals to be housed or parked in specific designated areas with the intent to allocate resources to set up city-sanctioned sites. And I sent you all about a week or so ago a link to that city council work session. And they provided some detailed information about not only the scope of the issue that they're really looking to solve, the scope of the problem, but they also talked about the various solutions that they're looking at. So hopefully you had a chance to kind of go through that city staff presentation. But the city staff has been working with a number of community partners. I'll tell you that the Eugene Chamber and Lane County and a number of others have been really collaborating on this project to identify sites and then narrow them down to a list of feasible options. So in your handouts, in the 3 handouts, one is showing a map of those sites, and 2 of those sites that have been identified, narrowed down to a few that are more feasible, are both LTD vacant properties. One is the site of the former River Road station, which is no longer in service, and that's at the corner of basically Beltline and River Road. And then the other is adjacent to our Ride Source offices at Garfield and 2nd. And those are both indicated on little stars in the handout. Those properties are both currently vacant, and they're both intended to be surplused by the board at some point for future sale. So I want to make it really clear that it has not yet been determined precisely which of these total sites the city will end up using, nor do they know the specifics about how each site's going to be programmed. And so in other words, what type of sheltering or setup will be configured to each site. They talked about some of those different options at the council session. But this list that they've come up with has now been made public, and they've started doing the outreach to residents and businesses in the area, just to help inform some of those decisions that they'll eventually be making. If you look at page 74 of your packet, it talks about the engagement framework as to how the communication will be structured. And as I mentioned, that work is already underway. On Monday, I attended the River Road neighborhood meeting, where the two sites being considered in the River Road area were discussed at length. So there was also a news release in your handouts that was provided to you, and it is the complete list of sites. And there's also been media coverage on the topic. So word is out there, and people are having conversations about this action. So the last thing I'll mention is that there's a fact sheet that just kind of provides some detailed information and questions you may actually have. So while there are definitely some still things to be determined with regards to the sites and how they're going to be utilized, what we do know is that they're each going to be managed by the city, and that they will be leading on the outreach to the community, and providing ongoing support and the structure needed to really have this program be successful, because of course that is everyone's shared goal. So the decision before the board tonight is simply to authorize the general manager to negotiate and execute an agreement with the city on leasing these properties for this specific purpose, as to be determined most suitable. And of course, based on the board's previous conversations and directions, AJ would also have the authority to negotiate a revenue neutral agreement if an in-kind value could be established to offset that market lease amount. The Eugene City Council will also need to approve the use and the expenditure for any and all of these sites. But again, your action tonight would allow AJ to enter into those negotiations to help determine the feasibility and the appropriate programming for these two specific LTD properties. And again, there's no guarantee that the city will end up using either or both of these sites, but your action would provide that authority should both parties agree on the terms and conditions. So I've got Brooke here, I see, and I'm happy to take questions, or if they're kind of more technical about programming or whatnot, I will pass them to Brooke. So if you have anything, let me know.
Can you first share with us the discussion that happened at the River Road neighborhood meeting that you attended?
Yeah, definitely. It was a well-attended meeting. We actually have an employee that is on that board, so that was kind of helpful that there was a little bit of continuity there. The conversations were really geared towards they had a robust discussion about they talked about some of the concerns being that there is a high concentration of the sites seeming to be identified in the north areas of town and nothing in the south, and that's really just kind of seems to be a product of what's out there. So they had some concerns about the concentration of the two sites, as well as across the street there is actually a service center that's been set up by the county. There was some concerns about the proximity to the high school, but I would say that ultimately they took a vote, and most people were either supportive or they did kind of the thumb sideways, and they just kind of wanted some more information. I should say the city was there to present, so I was just there as a fly on the wall to listen, because this, like I said, the city's really handling all of that outreach and mitigating the concerns and all the things, so, but I think I would say the outcome was pretty supportive. A lot of people saying, it beats having, because that neighborhood has actually experienced a lot of the unsanctioned camping that's happening along Beltline, as well as there's an intersection right there that has been a site for probably about a year now with unsanctioned camping. So I think people were supportive of moving towards solutions to kind of find better places for people to be and start connecting them to services.
Right. Well, let me see if we have any questions here. Not yet. I would definitely say it makes sense to me, the placement specifically with access to resources. That Garfield site is so close to Eugene Mission. It's close to the dining room. It's close to the Lindholm Center. And so it makes a lot of sense that there's walkable access to resources. So I'm excited about the possibility of the Garfield site. Anyone have any feedback about this? Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, Caitlin. And first, Tiffany, thanks for this presentation. Very, very helpful and well done. A comment just in general, I realize that Eugene is leading this, but I would hope that we would make it clear from the LTD side that it's particularly important that we listen to the surrounding neighbors, whether they are residential or commercial or business, because unfortunately with this sort of situation, there can be an increase in unsavory activity, vandalism and what have you. And so I just think it's very important that we are responsive, well, the city is responsive and we support the city in being responsive to making sure that those legitimate concerns by surrounding business owners and property owners are not just heard, but also addressed, maybe including having some sort of added security walking around the neighborhood, just keeping their eyes open. And then secondly, and I might be stepping over, I might be getting out of the LTD lane, but I just wonder if the city is planning on having a safe needle exchange at these sites. That's particularly productive, helpful, and it saves the community writ large a lot of money over time. Reduces the transmission of HIV, for instance, and other issues. So I don't think we can ask for that or insist on it, but I would just support the city helping to meet this community need, these folks who need help. That might be something to just mention to the city, assuming the city is not already on board with that or thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Those are excellent comments. I'll say one thing and then I'm going to let Brooke address your second question or comment, I should say. The first is that Pat Walsh and I have both been attending weekly meetings with the city, the county, the chamber. We talk about all the outreach that's being done. We talk about the site selection process. And so it's actually a really collaborative process, obviously being led by the city, but we have you know, our ear to the ground on what's happening. So we have a good sense of you know, we can just help participate in that process and we'll continue to do that. So just know that LTD does have a seat at the table to ensure that I think for the most part, just the collaboration is really helpful. There's a lot of ideas that come out of it. Obviously, this is the first time we've done this in our community. So it's really helpful to have a lot of people at the table. As far as the needles and some of the other services provided and whatnot, I think I'll let Brooke chime in if she has specifics on that particular topic. I see she's here with us. So hi, Brooke.
Hey, thank you for having us. And I just want to thank you very much for the partnership and support. It's so important for our community in this time. And just really want to thank you all for considering this and really being such supportive partners. To answer the question about the needle exchange, you know, we are working very closely with the social service providers to determine the sort of what services will be offered on site. And so the specific answer to that question I don't know yet whether that would be offered at these sites, but I do know that those providers are going to help us to make sure that all of our residents of these sites will be well connected to the services they need. And so if not provided at this specific location, we would hope to have and plan to have navigation services that help connect them to the services that these individuals need to be successful. So that's been really important to us as we start to build that model. What do we need to provide so that folks don't stay homeless, but they can transition into better circumstances for themselves?
Thanks for answering that, Brooke. Dawn, Michelle, or Susan, I just want to make sure you guys have a chance to chime in if you would like to.
I was able to ask questions at the previous meeting where we discussed this topic. I think it's great that we're looking for solutions and that that we potentially have some property that will help provide a central location for people to be able to live there, and connect to the services that they so desperately need.
Thanks.
I'm supportive of the LTDs helping the community solve the community's problems. It's community land and community assets. So it seems like, well, we've discussed this and I'm in favor of supporting whatever efforts we can do.
Well said. Thanks so much, Dawn. Susan, did you want to weigh in?
I would just echo what both of the previous speakers said. I do appreciate what seems to have been a very thoughtful process and very deliberative, which is likely to be very important moving forward to the success. So I think this is an exciting moment for that.
Thanks so much, Susan. And then lastly, I want to make sure we hear what Josh has to say, but so far, I think we've got some great support from your board members. So, and that's an accolade to you, Tiffany, and you, Brooke, and everyone from the city of Eugene who's attending tonight, that we just really appreciate the thoroughness of this partnership, the information that's been presented, and really going the extra mile. I love these LTD kind of puns, but going the extra mile to really make this community a better place. So thank you to all of you. And then Josh, why don't you go ahead and ask your question or add your comment?
Oh yeah, I'll keep it quick because everybody has, I'm just agreeing. I guess I really appreciate the work with all the partners and just making this such an amazing group effort. And I know there's been a lot of work, not just with public sector folks, but with the chamber as well. And we saw that in the materials we got. I would just comment I think we all know this, but just to be clear, the context is there's been this explosion in the homeless population in the U.S. during the pandemic, and it's really, we're just frustratingly downstream of a giant problem that can't be solved easily. It can't be solved at all solely at the local level, but there are things we can do, and I think it really speaks well of the community that we're doing this, and I'm glad LTD can support. The only little substantive thing I would add that sort of to tack on to something, Tiffany, I think you referred to something AJ had said. I definitely appreciate the sort of the fiscal eye to this and not wanting to have budget impact, but if we have to, spend some money on this, it just seems appropriate. I'm not saying, open the floodgates of cash, but I think I guess I feel like this is the sort of thing where we're trying to adapt to changes during the pandemic, and we have money to deal with the pandemic. And so I would just say, within reason, let's, be the best partners we can be. But otherwise, I'm supportive. Thank you.
Great. So I just want to echo again, thanks everyone for chiming in on this important topic. If someone is interested in making a resolution, as we noted earlier, there was an amended resolution. So Camille, did you say that was titled Handout 5?
The amended resolution is Handout 5. However, the motion in handout 4 is the correct motion to read.
Okay. Okay. Everyone get that?
Apologies for the convolution.
Totally fine. If anyone wants to make a motion, we absolutely can do that at this time.
I'll take care of that for you, Caitlin.
Thanks.
I move adoption of LTD resolution number 2021-06-16-034. It is hereby resolved that the LTD Board of Directors adopts a resolution authorizing the general manager to negotiate and execute a contract with the City of Eugene to lease LTD's vacant properties located at 310 Garfield and 11 River Avenue.
Thanks,
Second.
Michelle. All right, so we have Michelle making the motion and Stephen second. Thanks so much. And then let's do a roll call vote. We're going to start with Susan Cox.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Thank you, Susan. Joshua Scove.
Aye.
Thanks, Josh. Don Norden.
Aye.
Thanks, Don. Michelle Weber.
Aye.
And then let's go with Stephen Yett.
I want to mimic Susan. Enthusiastically, yes.
Great. I'll jump on that bandwagon. I will do another enthusiastically yes. So passes with flying colors, then I would say. So once again, big thank you to Tiffany and Brooke for taking the time to be here tonight, and any chamber employees and then city employees as well. And let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So we're going to get a strategic business plan update from Kim. And where's Kim? See Tom. There's Kim. All right, awesome. Well, welcome, Kim. Welcome, Lindsay. Nice to see you. And then Tom, we're also excited to hear from you. So thanks so much for taking the time to be here tonight, you guys.
Great. Well, I'm going to kick things off here. So good evening. We've reached the point in the strategic business plan development process where we have a draft to share with you tonight. Lindsay Schofield is going to take you through the draft and share some results from the survey of community stakeholders. And then Cosette and I will also be contributing by going through 2 of the tactics that have been included in the plan. And the hope there is that that's going to give you a sense of how we're tying the specific work that we do to the larger mission, vision, and values of the organization. And with that, I invite Lindsay to begin her presentation.
Great, thanks, Tom. And thank you everyone for having us to provide this update. I will try to cram in as much as we can in the half hour that we have. For those of you who take part in the SPC meetings, you know that we have had a couple of 2-hour work sessions. So we're just going to try to bring you up to speed and give you a glimpse before you're going to be looking and reviewing the full plan. So wanted to, you've heard the SPC, a brief update in the beginning of the meeting, but we'll just go over a little bit about what those work sessions have looked like. We'll highlight the draft strategic business plan and some of the feedback that's been incorporated from those committee discussions, as well as feedback from internal discussions within LTD with staff across the entire organization, as well as through the community stakeholder survey. And then I will preview the actual draft plan document. And that's when, as Tom mentioned, we'll pass to him and Cosette to really give you more of a taste of how this connects to the day-to-day work. And that, I think, was one of those light bulb moments at the end of the last SPC meeting. You know, actually seeing the details of the plan really helps to connect those bigger mission vision items. And I'm actually really pleased to just be listening into your board meeting and hearing a lot of those values and elements of the mission and vision in the topics that you've been discussing. So from the sustainability and equity that was mentioned in the grant application, and the conversation you were just having about community partnerships and the value that you're delivering by supporting the homeless community. You know, these are things that I think you'll find reflected and really encapsulated in the direction of the strategic business plan. So we're excited to share that tonight. So this is just an overview of the work sessions. I know you have this in your packet, so I won't belabor it, but just to give you a sense of the types of dialogues that we've been having with the SPC over the past few months. And the most recent meeting was the June 1st meeting, where we provided a little bit more of an update on the targeted stakeholder survey results. We also shared the draft plan and had discussion around that. And then Tom and Cosette provided a similar update and walkthrough of a couple of examples of tactics that you'll hear this evening as well. Our next session, it sounds like, may change timing a little bit, but in July, we will be presenting the final draft of the plan, and then after that, we'll come in front of the board for your adoption of the plan. So we're really excited about where we're getting to. So a couple of areas that I wanted to highlight. The first is in regards to the values. We've talked about the why, what, how, who, and the why really encapsulates the mission, vision, and values. The values are about how the LTD workforce really engages with one another and with the community to deliver their work. And it's such an important part of the culture and how we're perceived and our employee engagement. So these values are really, really critical. Initially, diversity was identified as a value, and there was a definition developed, a behavioral definition for that. And the SPC really challenged the LTD team to consider whether diversity was the right way to think about this value, and encourage us to think about equity. Lane Transit, as you know, has a diversity council that was also engaged in this dialogue. So really came to redefine and reframe this value. And now this is something that I know the whole team is really proud of, and proud of that effort. It's a really critical part of not only the national conversation and focus, but also locally. There's definitely a commitment to this value that we've experienced throughout the project. And so we're excited about that change in the plan as well. There's also modifications to the vision statement based on the last SBC meeting. What we found was that there was generally stronger positive sentiment around the mission statement, and the vision statement was something that we had a little bit more commentary about, wanting it to convey a stronger sense of commitment. And that's something that we heard a little bit both verbally in the SPC meetings, but also received some of that feedback in the targeted community stakeholder survey. And so in the meeting, we kind of wordsmithed the vision to take out the word seek in particular, although LTD staff was really thinking about that as an aspirational word. We've swapped that out to emphasize the commitment. So not just seeking, but actually putting a stake in the ground that in all that we do, we are committed to creating a more connected, sustainable, and equitable community. And again, I think that just even hearing this meeting, heard Tiffany touch on sustainability and equitable community in the grant application. The word connected is something that you may recall seeing in the draft mission statement. That was part of the why that we actually heard almost every SPC member mention as, you know, one of the reasons that they're excited and why they're involved on the SPC. So we're really excited about what this encapsulates and represents in terms of what LTD is striving to achieve. The next item I wanted to highlight is in regards to the success outcomes. So these are the few concrete, measurable success outcomes that will help you all to really focus on all this work and all of these performance metrics. What do they actually add up to? So we try to think about these big areas like community value and customer satisfaction, and employee engagement, sustainability. What are these big areas that we want to put a stake in the ground around where we want to be in the next 3 years. And so one of the things that initially on the left-hand side, you see we had framed these as a number of these as an increase of X% in this case, the community's perception of the value we provide. And it was, I think, a very valid comment that may not be meaningful. So an increase is great, but what does that mean? Does that mean that 30% of the community has a positive perception? Does it mean 75%? So we've made that change. So the goals will be based on a goal of always increasing and getting better, but we'll actually be explicit about what we're trying to achieve. So it'll be more transparent, more meaningful as a public-facing outcome. And we've made that change to the community value outcome, as well as the customer satisfaction and the employee engagement outcome, so that those are all kind of following the same format. The actual numeric goals, right now you'll still see placeholders. We actually had some dialogue today to start to set some numeric goals based on previous surveys that that LTD has conducted, as well as some benchmarking information. So that will definitely be shared in the next draft coming through. A couple of other planned modifications that we wanted to just highlight briefly. It was brought to our attention in the introductory letter in the draft plan to acknowledge the wildfires. So we had talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, but also wanted to acknowledge the wildfires. The tactics pages, which we'll share today, the redesigned format of those, it wasn't as clear how they connected to the strategic outcomes. So what we tried to do, the SPC reacted really positively to how clear it was in the performance metric and the performance scorecard, the metrics and how they impacted these big strategic areas. So we've done some reworking to make that connection stronger for the tactics. And then wanted to provide a bit of an update on the stakeholder survey. One thing in the last meeting when we met with SPC, the response rate we reported was about 45%. We actually, as of 6/9, it was at 65% because at the encouragement of SPC, the LTD team did some additional higher touch outreach to really encourage some additional groups to participate. So 65% had it responded as of 6/9, and actually as of today, we're now at 71%. So we're feeling much better about the responsiveness and really great inclusion of a number of different types of groups. So I would say kudos to the LTD team for one, identifying a really good list, and then for their additional efforts to really boost those response rates in response to SPC's encouragement to do so. A couple of just notes are that the majority of respondents have reacted positively to the mission and vision statements. So we take that as a good sign that we're moving in the right direction. I mentioned the change to the vision statement that's been made. And a couple of other things in the survey really confirmed the importance of a lot of the key themes to be addressed in the plan. So you can see the list here. Each of these areas, over 80% of the respondents said that all of these areas were important. And we also had open-ended opportunity to provide, anything that might be missing that we didn't include in the survey. And there were no major themes that were indicated as missing. So that was, I think, a good sign of alignment with the community and priorities in the community. So just wanted to give you that brief update. This was, as you may recall, as part of the communications plan that was adopted earlier in the project. So really just working that communications plan and really making sure that we're not overlooking any key areas as we develop this first strategic business plan. So as we get into the plan, again, just wanted to re-emphasize this overall framework that we're working within. So the why is the mission, vision, values. The what being what we're going to do that's aligned with those mission, vision, values, the measurable strategic outcomes. The how and the who, that's where we get into the details and really the heart of the plan in terms of LTD's work efforts. So that's where we've got the tactics, the work activities with milestones. It's where we have all of the detailed performance metrics, and staff is really empowered to manage how that work gets done, who's responsible for it, and then you all will have very clear alignment on how to hold the team accountable for that. So if we're meeting our outcomes, we know we're doing something right, and if we're not, we know what levers we can pull and push on to make sure that we're trending in the right direction. And before I get into the draft plan, I just wanted to kind of lay out how this all really does cascade from one element to another. I know in the beginning it feels very theoretical and at this very high level. And so we start off with the mission and vision, and that's really our North Star. And then the outcomes cascade from there. So in order to accomplish our mission and vision, what are those key priority areas that we want to set specific targets around? So you can see here in the middle of the slide what those 5 areas are. And then we cascade that into the tactics and the performance scorecards. So each of these areas, so for example, customer satisfaction, on-time performance for the fixed route system is one of the tactics. There's a number of quarterly milestones, so you can see what staff is going to be trying to accomplish in order to maintain that high on-time performance. And again, the reason it's important is not just because on-time performance is important, but it's actually because customers have rated that as one of their top areas that's most important for their satisfaction. So all of this is really in service of achieving these larger outcomes. And then you can see the detail of the scorecard as well. So measuring those, there's tracking on a quarterly basis. Again, if we're trending positively on these metrics, we have a better sense of whether we're going to be able to achieve these outcomes and ask informed questions if we're not hitting those targets. So the next item that I'd like to just share briefly, and then I will invite Tom and Cosette. Hang on one second while I toggle my screen. Is the draft plan. Just see. Okay. So I won't go into this in a lot of detail. You'll see this in the next update, but just wanted to give you a teaser of what's to come and the type of document that that the team is really working hard to produce over the next couple of weeks. So we start with a letter from AJ, a summary of the process and engagement, highlight of the mission, vision, and values. And as you can see here, there's the team. This is where really a huge cross-section, over 50 employees across the organization through the Inside the Bus process, really collaborated to provide the ideas that formulated these behavioral definitions of the values. I know the team is really proud of that. The success outcomes that we just mentioned. And again, this alignment between each of the areas, the tactics that are aligned with them, and the performance metrics. I'm going to jump to the work plan. So this is part of the reworking that we've done to make it more clear. So what we've done is we've added a listing of the tactics in each strategic area. And that way there's at a glance sense of what's included in each of them. And then what we do is we've done some formatting to really highlight again that alignment of the strategy area. And what you'll find here is a description of what the tactic is, who at LTD owns it, and who are the team members that are contributing to that. Within this is then quarterly milestones. So the team again will be very transparent about what they're aiming to set out to achieve at the beginning of the year and being able to measure against that, so we don't end up at the end of a fiscal year realizing that we're behind on a bunch of key initiatives. So this provides that organizing system for the team, for not only leadership and the board, but also for individual staff to really connect to these bigger mission and vision goals and success outcomes. They really can see how their work is going to cascade up to those big outcomes. And then I'm going to jump forward for a moment, and then we'll come back to Cosette and Tom. Just wanted to share a glimpse of what the performance scorecard is looking like. So within each of these areas, the team has had a lot of robust discussion. It's one of the hardest things to do is figure out what the priority levels are. I will start by saying that by definition, all 5 of these, by virtue of being highlighted in the plan, are very important. So 10 points does not mean not important. It just means within the top 5 most important things are focused on, that it requires less focus in this current 3-year period. And so you can see really an emphasis on people, particularly coming out of the pandemic. And that's the thinking behind really emphasizing focus on the customer satisfaction and employee engagement, and recognizing that those things really do drive community value and the perception of community value. Financial health, of course, continues to be important, and that there's a number of metrics that are a part of that. And then sustainability. This is something that I will say, even is unique to the Lane Transit District community. We work with a lot of transit agencies, and you might be surprised to see that their communities don't always rate sustainability as important, and they don't actually have any metrics related to sustainability on their scorecards. So I want to just highlight, sometimes it's easy to, not realize and take a step back. But I just, from that perspective of working with a lot of agencies across the country, that your commitment is really strong in this area, and that's something that's pretty notable from our perspective. And what you'll see is that at the organizational level, each of the metrics within the scorecard are also weighted. Again, it's a tool for management to think about if there's a particular metric that has the biggest impact towards success. If you have to make decisions, we all know time is limited, resources are limited. It really helps to just focus the team and always be looking at what are the big things we can focus on to move the needle on those bigger outcomes. So that's the idea behind the scoring system and how it adds up to 100. So it gives that sense of, a lot of times with performance metrics, some go up, some go down, and it can be kind of confusing to understand, does that mean we had a good year or not if some things went up and some went down? But with the scoring system, we know that a 90 out of 100 is an A in, when we go to school. So that gives a sense overall, are we trending in the right direction? Or do we have 60 out of 100 and we have a lot of work to do? So that's the idea behind the scoring system. So with that, I'm going to back up and actually invite, I think, Tom to kick us off. And I believe you are intending to highlight the baseline analysis of equity of LTE services.
Particularly since that's the slide that you have up, so I will definitely do that. So yeah, thanks, Lindsay. This is really helpful, and so I want to walk through with you. And I don't know if you described it, but we went through a process of trying to identify which tactics we wanted to make sure we were focused on to move the dial on certain outcomes, and so. The equity of our services was a big one. And as you see in the title here, our objective at the beginning of this is really to establish a baseline for our analysis of equity of LTD services. And so you can see here, well, first of all, the layout of this, and you'll see this in each of the tactics will have something like this. You'll see who the owner is. You'll see who the team members are. And then this will give you kind of what we're trying to achieve by quarter. And so the first of all, if we haven't talked about it before, given the adoption, expected adoption in July, we would begin our measurement in the second quarter, so September 1st. And what we're doing in this particular tactic in terms of establishing the baseline for equity, we're kicking off a meeting and we're defining the goals and objectives of the definition. There are some examples that we can use. I'm not going to get into the specifics now, or I'm going to try not to, but there are some examples that we can draw on, and we're going to look at those kinds of things. But we really want to make sure that we're developing metrics and all around our measures of equity. Of course, the board will see this, SPC will see this as we go through this process. But you can see the progress that we're trying to make here in the first few quarters here to try and establish that baseline. And again, I can go into more detail here, but you see it here. I don't need to necessarily read it to you. So that's an example of a specific tactic that I think you would agree this really ties to some of the big things we're trying to accomplish with mission, vision, and values.
Great, thanks, Tom. And then Cosette, I believe the tactic that you are going to speak to is this customer convenience.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. So good evening. Tom just described one of the tactics under customer satisfaction. Another tactic I want to share with you is a bundle of activities that we're calling enhanced customer convenience. This includes utilizing technology to make information to ride the bus more accessible and more convenient, as well as optimized tools to provide an enhanced customer service. Some of these improvements include updating or replacing current information technology, such as our website and our trip planner, and expanding new technologies to improve quality service, such as our electronic fare collection system. Originally, as we were developing our tactics, these were all being looked at as individual tactics, but we recognize that there's value in bundling them into a single tactic that encourages us to take a holistic approach by the whole organization. As you can see, this tactic is broken down into quarterly milestones that will allow us to measure and report back our progress. It allows us to hear from our customers how we're doing and further engage to help identify ways to use technology to provide that enhanced experience. I'll be the owner of this tactic, but I'm not necessarily the expert on all of this. So I'll be working with power experts within the organization to accomplish these tasks. Back to you, Lindsay.
You. And what I'm going to do is switch back to the PowerPoint for a moment, make sure we have time to get through that, and then we'll answer some questions. So again, what you just heard was Tom and Cosette sharing some examples, some illustrative tactics. They're also in the packet some additional tactic names and their alignment and who the owner department is. But what I will share is that there are 30 plus of these tactics that the team has really worked hard to put together, and we'll be sharing those in the next draft that you all see for consideration. And it really does demonstrate just a huge breadth of work and exciting projects that are in the pipeline over the next few years. So before I open to questions, I just want to share a couple of next steps. Going to continue, we're on obviously this fast-paced timeline. So we continue to work in between these board and SPC work sessions with the directors group. I know they're working with their staff and teams to really refine the draft plan using the inputs that we're hearing from the various stakeholders in the process. And then what we'll be doing is really, again, these dates, at least this July 6th date sounds like may move, but looking to have the board adopt the plan on July 21st during that board meeting. And that would officially kick off the transition into implementation and working the plan. So we talked a lot about this being a really actionable plan. Hopefully in the tactics and the glimpse of the scorecard, you can see how that is going to become a tool that you all will be engaging with at least on a quarterly basis, and really builds in a lot of outreach. So you can see in terms of the outcomes, it will require actually surveying the community. It will require continuing to survey customers and the employees So it really builds in this additional level of engagement and partnerships in the community. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and invite questions or comments.
Don't see any hands raised in the participant box. Is there anyone that wants to respond to this latest draft?
I see a lot of really great work happening to develop this plan, and I'm super excited to see it come to a final draft. And let's thank everyone for all of their really hard work on getting this to where we are today.
Thanks, Michelle. Absolutely. Anyone else want to chime in? Stephen, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. Just a quick comment. Thank you, Cassette, Lindsay, and Tom for the presentation. Appreciate it very much. Very helpful.
Thanks, Stephen. Go ahead, Don.
Well, I was impressed at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting when this was presented at that meeting, the level of excitement about it. And Lindsay really carried that through, convinced me anyhow that the staff that she's working with out on this program, that they were excited about it. And so that felt really good to me.
Thanks, Don. Josh, did you want to contribute?
Sure. Stephen, were you going to say something? I thought his hand was up. Sorry.
Oh, it was. He already went.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I didn't know if you were going to say more. Okay. I guess I will, well, let me echo some of the comments that were already said. Like in general, I mean, first of all, just thank you to all of the staff who participated in this. Lindsay, I appreciate how you emphasized the extent to which, people throughout the organization contributed. I mean, it's, one can make a beautiful, apparently platonic ideal of a strategic plan that then sits on the shelf uselessly if it hasn't engaged the people in the organization. So this is great. Thank you for doing that. And Tom and Cosette, your piece has really helped flesh out those bits. I think, it's difficult to react too much because I think as tidy as TransPro's diagram is that shows the division of labor between the board and the rest of the organization, the highest level pieces of the strategic plan and then all of the tactics kind of define that gray area. And so until we really have a chance to see the tactics and understand, the building blocks of it, I can't really react fully. I think that so I'll wait till we see more of that, but that doesn't contradict my sort of overall sense of like real excitement. I'm sad that Emily is not here to see it because I know I'm sure she was pleased at the SPC, or if she wasn't able to make it, will be when she sees all of this. I do want to call out a couple things, and Lindsay, it'd be great if you'd speak to this now, but we can also deal with it in greater detail later. Although in general, I like certain aspects of the structure of the plan, I'm concerned a little bit with the structure of the scorecard. I like scorecards, but I have become wary of the extent to which mutually exclusive scoring systems create analytical silos, and they sort of encourage artificial separation among things that are ultimately quite integrated. I think it'd be pretty easy for any one of us to stare at any two of those highest level categories and say, well, for example, you look at it and you say like, well, community engagement and community value and customer satisfaction. Wow, I'm pretty sure we can find gray area there without trying too hard. So coming up with scores, I'm a little less enthusiastic about until I sort of see the details. Also, I know you said, and this is funny because in part of my day job, I work for a university. I'm going to complain about how you said, we know 90 out of 100 is an A. How could I ever complain about that? But actually the point in something like this is, I think, less to give a grade and more to assess progress. I mean, a grade almost by definition is an endpoint, which is not always the same as progress. So I wonder about the calibration on that, but I can, you know, as I said, I can wait until we see more of the details. And then final comment, not to be totally predictable, but I do want to push back a little bit on your framing of how some agencies aren't so interested in sustainability. Well, I'm not so interested in those agencies. And in fact, I guess I would say that when, and I kind of invoke this for the sake of the other board members who saw this a year and a half ago, when you think back to the agencies that we looked at as potential role models, you know, peer agencies and agencies that are kind of too big to be peers, they're all talking about sustainability. So actually, I think although we are trying to lead, we are part of a pack that is leading. You know, we're in that peloton at the front. We're not all by ourselves at all. So I want to make sure that people don't mistake that framing. I appreciate that TransPro, and this will sound like I'm damning with faint praise, but I'm not. I swear, I totally mean this. I actually really appreciate that you guys work throughout the country and you get to experience all these different perspectives and sort of different regional politics and culture and preferences. And that actually, I know, informs us a lot, and we're real beneficiaries of your expertise in that regard. But that doesn't mean that those, I don't think it's helpful to juxtapose this with parts of the country that have agencies that don't signal this at all. I mean, there are parts of the country where you can't say climate change out loud in the strategic plan, right? For political reasons. That's not very helpful juxtaposition for us. So that's a long way of saying I'll probably complain about that being 10 points later, but I'll save it for when we have the tactics in front of us. But respond to any of that if you want, but overall, this is a lot of work and has really moved us toward what I think we have needed badly as an agency. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I'll try to really quickly address some of it, but I know we'll probably want to do some follow-up on some of those items. I'll maybe start backwards. And yeah, I definitely recognize, and I hope it didn't sound like we were to say that LTD was alone in prioritizing sustainability, but just to put into perspective that that it is actually being prioritized by virtue of being one of the 5 areas. So we can certainly have dialogue around LTD's thinking around the weighting and the scoring, and obviously, as you know, has really committed to those significant goals around sustainability. So those are still incorporated. But we can definitely talk more about that weighting. And just in general, in the kind of philosophy around the scorecard, I would agree with your point about the grade not being an endpoint. But it is, what we find helpful is that just for the general person to kind of assess progress, is that it's really clear on a 0 to 100 about where things are trending. So that's the idea there, more so than saying, oh, you haven't achieved 100 points and so you failed as an organization. So I think that's a good nuance to be mindful of as this is coming together. And then I think your point about really a lot of these areas do intersect and integrate, and you would probably be hard pressed to be an organization that does extremely well in, for example, customer satisfaction, and does really poorly in, say, community value. It's, a lot of these things, you're tackling a lot of the same levers or some of the same things that are going to impact others. And I think where we achieve a lot of that breaking down of silos and that risk of things happening in silos is really through those tactics, and the fact that I don't think there's really a single tactic that only has one department involved. And so that's really helping to ensure that even if there's a tactic that is mostly aligned with a particular strategic area, it's not organized in a way. You heard Cosette speak about IT and marketing and planning. So there's a lot of different departments that will make sure that there's not too much siloing. And then the other just comment about the scorecard and the metrics would be, we talked in the SPC about like having some metrics in the scorecard that don't, that can't be gamed or kind of get things off balance. And we call it tension in between metrics. So for example, there was a comment on sustainability, like if we just didn't have as much ridership and reduce service, then we could achieve some of our reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, right? But the counterpoint of that is that we do have ridership on the scorecard and do want to get folks out of single passenger vehicles and know that providing productive transit is actually going to help us achieve that goal. So there's kind of that consideration of metrics that might be in tension with one another. But yeah, I think as you see more of the details, I agree it'll make more of those connections will come through, and there'll be obviously more to react to. So appreciate those comments. I know the team will be discussing those further as well.
Thanks for replying, Lindsay. Stephen, oh, Josh, did you want to reply?
I was just going to say very quickly, that's all helpful. Thank you, Lindsay. The only thing I would just say, and again, we can talk about this more later, but you used the word trending a couple of times. But I guess I would just say that how high a score you get is really about how you set up the grading rubric. And so we could easily just get high scores every year or low scores every year and not actually have the framework match progress. So I think there's work to be done that I think we need to pay close attention to as a board. I think we've already had the experience of not having a great framework for evaluating the general manager. And so, and sort of feeling like we hadn't set up the right grading framework. So anyway, I'm just sort of signaling there's work to do, but your comments are great. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen, go ahead.
All right, Caitlin, I think Don had his hand up first. I don't want to jump queue.
Oh, that's the same hand from earlier.
Oh, I didn't recognize it. Thank you. And I'll be brief, Caitlin, I promise. Lindsay, I think you made a very good point, and I think Josh did too. I think the point that you made, Lindsay, which I think is spot on, is it's important to have certain metrics in the scorecard that cannot be unsaid or unmentioned. For instance, to purchase electric buses, excuse me, that needs to be mentioned or part of our commitment along those lines. But I think Josh's point is also correct, is we got to be careful on the scorecard of how much indexing we put to doing something that every or nearly every agency around the world is doing, such as buying electric buses. It needs to be mentioned, but if we aren't, that's a dereliction of duty. And if we are, it just should be noted, okay, we are basically showing up to the office, and it should not be getting a high score. That's my point. Thank you. And thank you, Caitlin, for allowing me to say something.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Lindsay, go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you. That is definitely helpful, and it's something that, and that's part of. Just to speak a little bit about the sustainability goals. It's I think part of the conversation, because LTD is already really advancing and committed, that takes less effort and focus because there's some momentum behind it already. Whereas some of the other areas, there are some new baselines, some new programs and initiatives to really be impacting those areas.
We have about 6 minutes left. So if anyone has a final comment or question, now would be the time. Okay. Let's see. We are, just want to make sure I am not skipping ahead. Okay, so it looks like this was just for information and discussion. And any last pieces, Tom, Lindsay, or Cosette, before we move on to our next agenda item?
No,
again,
thank you.
Yeah, this has been good feedback. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to you guys for this and answering our questions and going through that great document. and we look forward to the exciting things happening in July. So Tom, I see you are going to stay on and give us an update on fiscal year 2022 service plan.
Yes.
All right,
and,
take it away.
I am joined by Director of Operations Jake McCallum on this. So, but to kick things off, as you saw in the AIS, we are in our plans to look at how we can increase service. We're running into the issue of not being able to hire enough operators. And so I wanted to, you should see that in the AIS, but I wanted to take some time tonight to go through that with you so you can understand kind of where we're at and all. And the information that is in the AIS is the basis for what we're doing. And if I can share my screen, we'll just jump right into it. There you go. So to start with, this table that was in your AIS speaks to some of the planning that we do, some of what we're looking at needing to increase our service. And what we did here was we aligned a couple of the bids that we were doing. So February 2nd was the winter bid for 2020. That's the baseline. That's the considered pre-COVID level of service that we were operating. And you can see there, to operate that level of service, we needed 195 drivers and we had 195 available. And so we put the service out. By March, kind of less than 2 months later, 6 weeks, we saw the need to reduce our service to 543 revenue hours. And that's the number of hours that we operate on a given weekday. For that, we needed 116 operators to operate that. We had 186. And of course, you might recall that those drivers were put to the necessary task of frequently wiping down our buses to maintain the safety. By January of 21, the winter bid, we made an increase in our service to 697 hours, which you can see there in the table represents about 76% of where we're at in February of 2020. For that, we needed 157 operators. There were 172 available. Again, we were still in that cleaning mode. What we planned for on June 13th would have been what we call the summer bid for 21, looking at increasing from the 543 to 697 hours. Oh, I'm sorry, I just went through that. So the June 13th plan was to increase it to 739 hours, which would have been about 80% of pre-COVID. We needed 169 operators, and for a variety of reasons that Jake can speak to, we only have 158. And so, as we're looking at things, what we have done a couple things. One is we postponed the start of the summer bid to June 27th. For that service, we'll be putting out about 700 hours. You can see that's basically the 697. We added just a little bit more service there. The drivers needed there 157. We have 158, so that's good. As I reported to you back in May, we've been having several conversations with U of O transportation folks about what's going to happen on campus. That's a big driver for what we do typically in the fall, as well as the return to school for high school and junior high, or I'm sorry, middle school. And so we originally planned to increase hours to 793. that would have been about 85% of pre-COVID. The operators needed for that 177. Again, we expect that we'll have about 162. And so that's not a viable thing to do. So we're looking now at strategies to hire more operators, but we're also looking, working with the U of O and others to determine, how can we put out service that can meet the emerging needs. And so we're working, that's kind of where we're at right now. In your packet, there was also a graphic just to kind of summarize what I just went through. You can see in this graphic that we had, again, the February is kind of that baseline. So you can see the low point was that March 23rd, that initial response. We went down there and then we increased our service again in January. Our proposal for summer, and that was the plan, was to raise it a little bit. We're not able to do that. We're sustaining essentially that level of service that we were operating starting back in January. And you can see our proposal was to, for fall, was to increase to this level. And at this point, with the uncertainties around operators and other things, oops, I'm sorry, we've, our area of potential is in that empty box there. So we're going to see what we can do, how much progress we make in terms of hiring new operators, and that'll be the basis for making decisions soon about what we can do for fall bid. And Jake, I'd ask you to weigh in here and talk maybe about the situation with respect to operator hiring.
Sure, Tom. Thanks. So yeah, unfortunately, some of the stuff that Tom's talking about, we've experienced many challenges related to recruiting, hiring qualified bus operators. The district historically has been very successful, but we currently are experiencing the same challenges that other transit agencies and businesses are in our state that are starting to try to open back up and really we're trying to support our community with transportation. So we're wanting to open back up and we're wanting to do these things. But unfortunately, as Tom articulated, there are some struggles. In 2 months of open recruitment, we've had a total of around 75 applicants. Typically, previously, we have been successful with actually a 2-week recruitment. We usually average around 100 applicants in 2 weeks. Our plan to support existing service and summer service increase and fall increase was based upon hiring about 20 operators. The plan was to hire a class of 10 operators with another class of 10 starting after the first class starts their en-route training. So they kind of overlap. We overlap these classes sometimes to get more people in quicker when we need to. Our first class started out actually as a class of 9 operators, moving to the next stage of hiring. The next stage includes several parts related to background checks, DMV records, and other requirements in order to be a bus operator. After completing this process, we were left with only 5 eligible to start the first class. Because of the unusual amount of time it took to get through this process, the start date of the class was pushed to June 28th from its original date of June 7th. So we're not only struggling to get applicants, we're struggling just to get through the process. And it's not just the things that we do, it's getting the things that are required from other agencies that participate in this as well. This has obviously pushed up the dates of the next 2 classes for operators. The July 19th class has been moved to August 9th, and we have a third class that will be sometime in November. And then the open recruitment thing is kind of new for us. Like I said, we normally do the 2-week thing, and we get so many applicants that we don't have to do an open recruitment. And this stage, we've just left it open, trying to get people in, and we'll bring them in as soon as we have enough people to start a class. Our classes of operators have historically been very successful with a graduation percentage of around 90%. Again, you know, this is another possible hurdle for us, as other local transit agencies are currently around 50% successful graduating rate, which is not very good. We are hopeful that our excellent training department won't fall into the same trend. The reality is the first class of 5 operators starting on the 28th basically will not even replace the operators we have leaving for retirements and other reasons. The shortage of operators is being discussed, you know, all over transit. WISTA, which is the Washington State Transit Association, OTA, Oregon, and then APTA. You know, so this isn't something that is normal for us, but it's something that everybody's dealing with all over the nation, basically, at this point, as they're trying to bring back service, add service. So as an active member of WISTA, hiring issues in Washington aren't new. Most of the transit agencies have had challenges before the pandemic and are all experiencing the same issues we are at LTD. And this is the same in California as well. The district and the union, you know, we're on the same page on this. We would like nothing more to add more employees and add more service. We're hopeful that we see, you know, we go back to our normal hiring trends that we've had in the past as we work our way out of this pandemic. But really, it's just an unknown. And this was an unfortunate decision that had to be made. But it was the best decision, because if we can't support the service, we can't support the service. And we've had people working through this pandemic the last year. And we just, even with the overtime that it would have taken, we would have been looking at probably having to cut service in the fall if we were able to potentially add service in this summer bid. So that kind of summarizes, hopefully, where we're at and why, and some of the recruiting stuff. And we're doing, you know, lots of different things from an HR perspective on recruiting. But these are all things that all other agencies are doing too, you know, to get operators in.
All right, guys, we've got 3 minutes left before we got to move on to the next part of our meeting. Do you have any more that you wish to share? Do you want to move on to questions from board members?
We're ready for questions.
Okay. So, 2 minutes. So let's do a speed round of questions for Tom and Jake. And Jake actually loves this when we run out of time and he doesn't have to talk or answer questions. So I know this about you, Jake. You're welcome.
Evidently, I had my timer set wrong, because it should have ended right at the 3 minutes.
Strategy. All right, who has questions for Jake and Tom? Okay, no from Susan, no from Michelle, no from Steven, no from Dawn, and no from Josh. Okay, cool. Well, that was easy, but thanks you guys in all seriousness for sharing all that information with us, the ridership update, and of course the challenges with staffing. I think that's really helpful for this whole group to hear. So I really appreciate you guys being candid about those barriers and what you're going through. So thank you for that. So we will see you again soon. So let's move on to our final agenda item for the evening. And AJ is going to start us out for that. And that is a discussion around our LTD board meetings. AJ, go for it.
Sure. This is an easy item. Staff has done all the heavy lifting on all the heavy items, so I get the good item, just as planned. So I want to provide information. I'm sure the board saw that the board president and I and Caitlin can talk further about it, about as we move forward through the summer and then looking forward to the fall, how will we continue to engage the public in our public meeting? So I have been engaged with Eugene Springfield, the county, ALCOG, and the Springfield Chamber to try to see what they are doing about public meeting and the recommendation or the strategy moving forward for today is that a lot of the agencies take a break during the summer and then are planning to come back in some form of hybrid for September. So in speaking with the board president, she can elaborate more. The plan moving forward is for July to do a virtual meeting from 3 to 5 for the regular board meeting. This allows for people who are on vacation or got lots going on during summer to take care of business. And for the August regular board meeting, as we looked at the agenda items, there was nothing pressing. So there was an opportunity to move items to July or move items to September. And for September, we will take the time that we would have taken in planning for the August meeting to test equipment, technology, as everyone is testing, to be able to hold a hybrid meeting in September. We don't have the specifics. We are testing the technology. And so is the Springfield Chamber. Lane Community College is another one that's doing the same thing. I failed to mention them, Springfield and Eugene. So more to come on this, but definitely I do think this is the right way forward so that we can relook at what resuming back to business looks like in the fall. And Caitlin, maybe you can elaborate a little bit further.
Sure, thanks for that explanation, AJ. This came up for a few different reasons in terms of changing the board meetings. One, it's really tough on LTD staff to have to work a full day and then be present at these LTD board meetings. So first and foremost, I want to recognize the large amount of time that the staff has to put in to work a full day and then present to the board and engage in that manner. So moving a meeting to part of the workday makes a lot of sense to me. And, you know, feel free to nod or give thumbs up if it does to you as well. But I think that would be a good consideration. Additionally, as we move to the hybrid format, it allows for more participation. So previously, people who maybe had a challenge with attending the meetings might not have that barrier anymore now that we're offering the virtual option to participate. And so removing that barrier, I think, gives us a little more flexibility. And then, of course, as volunteers, we want to be respectful of everyone's time and also kind of work this into the workday of the board of directors so that you're not working a full day and this meeting is taking away from time with family, friends, kiddos, whatever. And I want to be representative of who is on this board as well. And I would speak on behalf of myself and Emily with young children. Evenings are the worst possible time to have the meetings. So being able to shift that into our workday is showing, I would say, showing some consideration for who the board is composed of as well. So I really want to open this up for discussion and hear what others think. I'm hoping everyone is good with taking August off and getting a little bit of a summer break. If you want to argue against that, please feel free to do so. But please voice your opinion on both the shift to 3 to 5 p.m. instead of 5:30 to 7. Well, we would keep our work sessions on the opposite Wednesdays, as well as taking August off. So who has a comment? Okay, Michelle, you are up.
For me, I have to say that a 3 to 5 meeting is a huge challenge for me in the middle of, well, on a Wednesday period. Wednesdays are really busy for me, and I have a meeting at work that is right, I'm gonna butt right up against that.
Okay, thank you. Susan.
I have the same issue as Michelle. There would be times that during the workday, the 3 to 5 could be problematic. I mean, we'd try to be able to shovel things around, but there's times that it will be problematic. So.
And is that just, well, with you two in particular, is that Wednesday specific? Is that the, second Wednesday of the month, Wednesday specific? Or would that, if we said we're gonna do a different Wednesday and flip flop with work sessions, or we're going to do a different day of the week? I'm just kind of curious if you can expand on that.
For me, it is just the work day. It's not going to really depend on the day of the week necessarily. I would prefer to just keep it the same day so that doesn't change. I think going back and forth could be pretty complicated, but again, for me, it's not a particular day, it's the time of day.
Okay, Michelle?
I have a challenge both with the work. To Susan's point, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. It's a challenge for me to get out of work for those 2 hours. But Wednesdays are particularly difficult for me, as that day is loaded and it's a weekly commitment that I have at work.
Okay, Josh, do you want to weigh in? I see your hand up.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Caitlin, I really appreciate you bringing this up. And I mean, I know from being, over many years, an employer or a faculty member or just a collaborator as a consultant, that it's easy to accidentally have casually family unfriendly policies and scheduling in place. And so I definitely feel that. I missed a lot of bedtimes, previous service. I have carved this time out of my schedule going forward into the future. So there's rearranging to do. So I would encourage us to figure out some sort of, doodle poll from hell to try to figure out what works for people. But I will certainly try to go with the majority on this. I mean, I want these meetings to be, the meeting times to be as undisruptive as possible. As far as because you asked us to weigh in on the August meeting as well. I mean, who doesn't want more vacation? But I would say I'm a little antsy about that, only because the strategic planning effort has been so much outside of the board. And now that it's now that it's landing in details, I just really hope that I hope we have enough time to get that done and implemented and to move on. So I'm a little edgy about skipping August, but I will of course defer to the group.
And do you mean in terms, okay, so you're saying implementation, since we would be actually potentially adopting the strategic business plan in July. So you're saying implementation by, or can you clarify?
We're at our June meeting and we have not yet seen the thing that we will soon adopt that will have to fit with our GM evaluation structure going forward as well. So it feels like one board meeting in July, even if there's a work session, might be insufficient to do a good job on that. That's where I'm feeling antsy, entirely apart from anything else. But it sounds as if you and AJ had a conversation about sort of the total workload. So, I will do whatever the group wants, but I'm just sort of raising that issue.
No, thanks for bringing that up. The work session that we're looking at in July, we're specifically structuring that so you do have enough time to look at that final proposal and really feel confident in asking questions and having that discussion with the TransPro consultants. So that's a good point, but you know, we do want to use time in July work session wise to really make sure that we're staying on our timeline of adopting the strategic business plan by the
okay, actually that's helpful. Okay, then that's helpful to hear. It sounds like you guys have thought that through. Okay, then I retract my concern.
Yeah, and we'll still have a work session in August as well. So we won't. You don't get the whole month off per se, but at least the board meeting would be canceled. Okay. Thanks for that feedback. Dawn or Stephen?
Well, I just normally have to just adjust whatever happens around my schedule. I'm pretty flexible. So whatever we come up with that works for everybody, I can mix it in.
Okay. And Susan and Michelle, if we did, is there alternate times, like instead of a 3 to 5, if it was a 4 to 6 or something? I mean, just, is that still not doable for you? Are you saying no meeting during the workday at all?
No, I think we have some at noon, which actually there have been some meetings at noon, which work. That's just a time that I always am pretty flexible during the workday. I mean, 4 to 5 or the 3 to 5 is actually better. At least it's towards the end of the day.
Okay.
It's just I can't predict what's going to happen during the day of my workday. So I will obviously try to make it work, but I'm just that's the reality of my job right now.
Okay.
If we could push it to 4, that would alleviate a big portion of my time.
Okay. And you know, Emily isn't here, and there's a reason she's not here, because she can't make this time work. And so I want to make sure we're being respectful of her thoughts and feedback. So I'll make sure that maybe she shares that with this group. I'll touch base with her, so maybe she can send out an email and kind of talk about what she would be in support of as well, because I think she's an important part of this conversation. She's, you know, also juggling a lot as well, and I want to make sure that she's included. So Stephen, can you just give us a general consensus, your thoughts on this?
Sure. I think this is a challenging riddle to solve. I think you and AJ brought up some very good points. It's a hard lift for LTD staff, which we need to respect their time, and very long days like today. I think Michelle and Susan bring up some very strong points of those who have day jobs. They're challenging, and there are a lot of times that schedules are outside of their control, and they also have to balance all of the other people in their other world who they have to work with. So it's a difficult situation. Emily has a challenge. She has a young child, and that's of course a great responsibility, and it's difficult. I will defer to whatever the board decides. I have a little bit of luxury in that I work for an idiot, so I can move things around without too much difficulty. So I will just make it work. Thank you.
Okay, any thoughts from you, AJ, or anyone else on this call, Mark or Kristen? I just also want to make sure everyone's feeling heard on this topic.
Caitlin, when I'm hearing from the board as a consensus or a compromise, because there's a lot of competing priorities, is that perhaps a 4 to 6 would work. That allows people to kind of integrate it into their workday, but then also allows for that evening time that's a conflict. And so everybody just gives a little bit, but doesn't have to give everything at that time. That's something that can be discussed at future meetings. And if it doesn't work, something else. So there are no permanent decisions to be made here. It's just, this is the summer months. And I think this is a conversation the board wants to continue to have about how do you balance all the competing priorities. I do also think that the board may have different opinions once it becomes a hybrid, and maybe it becomes more or less inconvenient. So I would say there's no hard decisions to be made. This is just a temporary. So I would defer to the board president if you want to hold the meeting at 3 p.m., knowing the challenges. Maybe the good compromise could be 4 to 6. And then in September, re-looking at it and looking at the hybrids. The month of August, Camille and I can spend really collecting information from the board and also testing out the different technologies that the different jurisdictions are currently considering, including LTD. We're working with technology, an OWL type camera that could present. Some board members could be in person. So there's lots to consider going forward. So know that nothing today is permanent. This is just
right.
How do we proceed throughout the summer?
Well, I think a good next step is I take this feedback and check with Emily because I want to make sure that we're incorporating her thoughts into this. And I will propose kind of the different scenarios and let's see if that compromise time sounds good to her. So let me connect with her and then I'll connect back with you, AJ, and then we can figure out what to do from there. Does that sound good?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. As AJ said, you know, let's find something that works as best as we can, and nothing's permanent. You know, we can keep modifying until we find a sweet spot. Okay. Thank you all for weighing in on that topic. So let's go to our last agenda item. We're running about 6 minutes over, but we are on our last agenda item, which is written reports. AJ, are you giving a GM update?
I provided the GM update as a written report. There's nothing notable. A lot of meetings to attend, even virtually, long days. A lot of the committees are meeting and having the same discussions we're having today is next steps due to all the challenges of post-pandemic. So lots going on at the national, state, and local level. So if there's no questions from the board, that concludes my update.
Oh yeah, thank you to no one for offering 7:30 a.m. as an alternative. I have so many 7:30 a.m. board meetings.
Yeah.
Like not my favorite. So thank you.
We could do 6 a.m.
What was that?
Then we could do 6 a.m.
Mark.
I have yeah, I do a 6:45 this morning. So today was a 6:45.
Good grief, you guys. Okay. All right, board members, do you have any questions on any of the written reports that are presented? Okay, great. I do not see anyone on that. So sorry we went 8 minutes over, but I do want to thank you guys for keeping us on track this evening, knowing that we had a lot to talk about. My action item is to circle back and provide you as soon as possible with information about our next board meeting and working with Camille on our July work session as well. So I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate everyone being here.